The twin suns were setting behind the rocky mountains of Karvek Outpost. Orange light poured over the circular combat arena, where blood was spilled to settle pride and power. Hundreds of aliens stood around the fighting pit, their eyes glowing, their voices chanting one name, Tharek. He was the undefeated warlord of this outpost, a tall beast with violet skin, 4 arms, and cruel eyes. By his side stood his wife, Vela, a silver-skinned woman with bright white eyes, her face unreadable. She didn't cheer like the others. She just watched with a heavy heart, arms crossed, lips sealed. Then from the shadows a figure stepped into the ring. A human, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty coat and heavy boots. He walked slowly, like the fight didn't bother him. Like he had done this before many times, gasps filled the crowd. "What is a human doing here?" One alien whispered. "They don't fight in our ways," another spat, but the human didn't care. He looked straight at Tharek and said one line, voice calm like still water. "You dishonor her." The crowd fell silent. Even Tharek stopped. Smiling, he stepped forward with a snarl. "You come into my ring, human, and insult me?" The human nodded just once. "I challenge you," he said. "Not for gold, not for land, but for her." And he pointed directly at Vela. Everyone turned to her. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak, didn't stop him. She just looked at the human like she was seeing something for the first time. The judge, an old 3-eyed alien, raised his hand and shouted, "Challenge accepted, fight to submission or death." The ring shook with cheers, the crowd hungry for violence, but the human didn't even raise his fists yet. He just stood there, breathing slowly, calm like stone. Tharek roared and charged like a beast, swinging with 2 fists and a blade in the third hand. The human dodged, then ducked, then struck, fast and clean. One punch to Tharek's ribs made the warlord stumble. Another hit broke his grip on the blade. The crowd gasped. No one had ever touched Tharek before. No one but this human. Tharek screamed and fought harder, but the human moved like water, flowing between attacks, silent and sharp. Blood flew into the air, and Tharek's knees began to shake. The fight lasted only minutes, but felt like forever. In the final moment, the human grabbed Tharek's wrist, twisted and slammed him to the ground with a thundering crack. The alien warlord groaned, broken and defeated, unable to rise. The judge stepped in, declared, "Victory goes to the human by complete submission." The crowd fell into stunned silence. No one cheered, no one moved. They didn't know what to do. Their strongest warrior had just been destroyed by a soft-skinned outsider with no tribe, no fame. The human turned and walked away. He didn't raise his hands, didn't smile. He just looked at Vela as he passed her. She didn't follow Tharek, who was still moaning on the ground. She didn't rush to her husband's side. Instead, she looked at the human's back as he walked toward his tent at the edge of the outpost. And slowly, silently, she followed him. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. "Where is she going?" Someone whispered. "Why doesn't she help Tharek?" asked another. But no one stopped her. No one dared. As the stars began to shine above the outpost, and the night winds blew cold, the human stepped inside his tent, lit only by a dim lantern. He poured himself water, wiped blood from his hands, and sat on a crate. The fight had tired him, but his face showed no pain, no pride, just quiet. Then the tent flap moved, and she entered. Vela stood at the entrance for a moment, looking around. Then she stepped inside, without a word, and sat on the edge of his bed. Her silver skin shimmered in the low light, her white eyes unreadable. The human didn't ask her why she was there. He didn't reach for her, didn't question her choice. He just passed her a blanket and said, "You don't have to explain." She looked at the blanket, then at him, and for the first time in years, she felt safe. Outside, the outpost buzzed with rumors and whispers. Inside the tent, silence spoke louder than any words. That night, Vela lay in the human's bed, not as a prize, not as a slave, but as a woman who had finally made her own choice, and the legend began, not of the fight but of what followed it. The tent was quiet. Vela lay still on the edge of the human's bed, her back facing him. The blanket he gave her was rough, but warmer than any luxury she'd known beside Tharek. Outside, the winds howled through the dry canyons of Karvek Outpost. Inside, the silence was heavier than stone. Cade, the human, sat on the crate again, staring at the dim light of the lantern. He didn't speak, didn't move closer. He just listened. To the wind, to her breathing, to the silence between them. Vela turned slowly, looking at him from under the blanket. "You didn't have to fight him," she said, her voice soft and cracked. "I know," Cade replied, "but I did." "Why?" she asked, her eyes glowing faint in the dark. Cade didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because you looked tired of being his property." That sentence hit her like a quiet explosion. No one had ever said it like that before. Not even, in her own thoughts, she had been born into a warrior clan, raised to be given away in marriage to secure loyalty. Tharek had chosen her like he chose a weapon, strong, sharp, beautiful, but only to be controlled. But this human, this outsider, had seen something others ignored. Her exhaustion, her silence, her chained spirit behind her proud eyes. Vela sat up slowly, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "I should be scared," she whispered. "I should be ashamed." "You're free to feel what you want," Cade said, still not moving closer. She looked down, then asked, "And if I stay here tonight?" Cade stood, walked to the other side of the tent, and said gently, "Then you stay. Not because I won, not because you owe me, but because you want to." That was the first time she smiled. Not a big one, but soft, sad, and real. She had not smiled like that in years. She laid back again, this time pulling the blanket over her chest and closing her eyes, not from fear but peace, not from defeat but decision. Word spread quickly through the outpost. The human took Tharek's woman. She went willingly. Tharek has been shamed twice, first in battle, then in love. The rumors mixed, with fear and excitement. No one had ever seen a woman of the warrior caste choose another man so openly, especially not an outsider. In the morning, Cade stepped out of the tent into cold sunlight. Many eyes were watching him, some angry, some confused, some curious. He walked toward the well to fill a metal jug, ignoring the whispers. Then someone stepped in front of him. It was a younger male, armored in bone and pride, eyes burning with insult. "You dishonor our laws," the boy growled. Cade didn't flinch, just stared back. "She chose," he said. "I didn't take." The boy stepped closer. "You'll bring war." "I didn't start this one either," Cade replied, then walked around him calmly. Inside the tent, Vela sat up, hearing the words outside. She wasn't surprised. In her culture, a woman was not supposed to leave her bonded mate, not unless the clan approved. And Tharek's clan was strong, cruel, and proud. She stood and looked around the human space. It was simple. One bed, one crate, a water jug, tools, a small heater, but it was clean, quiet, and safe. She touched the edge of the bed, remembering the nights she had cried alone in Tharek's chambers. Now she felt something strange in her chest. It wasn't love. Yet it was possibility. When Cade returned, he found her standing near the lantern, holding her hair up with a cord. She had tied it back in a warrior's knot. Not his culture, but hers. It was a sign. "I'm not hiding," she said simply. "I know," he replied, pouring water into a bowl and offering it to her. She washed her hands and face without asking permission, without waiting for approval. He watched her, not as a man claiming victory, but as someone respecting strength. That afternoon, Vela left the tent and walked into the center of the outpost. Gasps echoed around as everyone saw her. She wore a long dark coat, Cade's coat, and her face was calm. She walked straight to the marketplace, picked up bread, handed over a coin, and walked away. A silence followed her steps, but no one dared stop her. She had made her decision, and when she returned to the tent, Cade was waiting with 2 mugs of hot root tea. They sat together drinking in silence. She finally said, "They will come for me." "I know," Cade answered. "I won't run." She added, "I didn't think you would," he said with a small nod. Then she looked at him and whispered, "Last night, I didn't lie in your bed because you won." "I know," Cade replied, his voice steady. "I lay there," she said, "because I felt like I was finally in my own skin." And with that, the bond between them began. Not born of battle, but of choice. The wife of a broken warlord had made a decision, and the whole outpost would soon feel the storm her freedom would bring. Pain woke Tharek before the healers could finish their work. His ribs were cracked, his arm dislocated, and 2 fingers wouldn't move. But worse than all of that was the silence beside him. His wife was gone. He growled and tried to sit up, but a sharp stab of pain forced him back down. A healer rushed to him. "You must rest." Tharek grabbed the alien's neck with one good hand, pulling him close. "Where is Vela?" He snarled. The healer's eyes widened. She didn't come." Tharek's breath stopped for a second. "What do you mean, didn't come?" he hissed. "She left." The healer stuttered. "With the human." Tharek's scream shook the healing hut. Outside, birds scattered into the sky. He shoved the healer away and stood, even as pain shot through his spine and knees. His pride was more wounded than his bones. The warriors of his clan came to him as he limped into the sand courtyard. "Tharek," one said, "you must rest." "She left me for an off-worlder," he spat. "You want me to rest while they sleep under my sky?" "They say she chose it," another added quietly. Tharek's eyes blazed. "No one chooses to leave me." He gritted his teeth, blood dripping from his lip. "If the human wants her, he'll pay in blood." In the shadows of the outpost, Cade cleaned a metal blade slowly. He didn't look worried, but he was alert. He knew Tharek's type. Men who couldn't accept defeat. Men who saw women as trophies, not people. And those men always came back, broken or not. Vela sat near the fire in his tent, sharpening a short blade. "I heard his scream," she said, not looking up. "I'm surprised it took him this long," Cade replied. She nodded, then whispered, "He won't challenge you fair again?" "No," Cade said. "He'll come in the dark." Later that night, they sat outside under the twin moons. Vela wrapped in Cade's coat, Cade holding a warm flask of tea. She asked, "Do you think I'm safe with you?" He took a long pause, then answered, "No one is safe when a prideful man is angry." She looked down, then back at him. "But I feel safer here than I ever did with him." Far across the outpost, Tharek met with 6 of his closest fighters. They were loyal to him not because of honor, but fear. "We strike tonight," he growled. "Burn his tent, take her back." One warrior hesitated. "But the council." "Do you serve the council or me?" Tharek roared. No one spoke again. Just after midnight, the wind picked up, howling across the sand. Cade stood in the shadows behind his tent, still as stone. He had set traps. Simple ones, but enough to warn him. The moment a small wire snapped, he moved. The first attacker stepped into the tent, blade drawn, but found only blankets and empty space. From behind, Cade struck fast. One hit to the neck, down. Another warrior leapt from the side. But Vela appeared like wind, slicing behind his knees. They fought like 2 parts of the same storm. Tharek waited just beyond the tents, heart pounding. He wanted to see the human bleed. He wanted to see Vela scream and run back to him. But instead he heard the groans of his men falling. One by one they were defeated, not by an army, but by 2. Cade stepped into view, sword glowing in moonlight. "You came yourself?" he asked, voice cold. Tharek growled, stepping forward with a heavy blade. "You think she loves you?" he spat. Cade shrugged. "Doesn't matter." Tharek roared and attacked, swinging wildly, pain and rage mixing in every strike. Cade moved carefully, not wasting energy. Vela watched from the side, blade ready. but not interfering. This wasn't her fight. Not yet. The two men clashed under the moons, Theric stronger but slower, broken from the last battle, Cade faster, smarter, reading every movement. The crowd gathered in the dark, silent, watching what they thought they'd never see again. Theric fell to his knees after a brutal strike to his shoulder. Cade stood over him, breathing hard, blade raised, but he didn't finish it. Instead, he said, "She left you because you broke her spirit." Theric snarled, blood on his teeth. "And you think you can fix her?" "No," Cade answered. "She fixed herself the moment she walked away." He dropped his blade into the sand and turned, walking back toward Vela. The crowd parted silently. Vela met him in the middle, placing her hand in his. Theric sat in the dirt, broken again, not by force but by truth. He had lost not just a fight but the woman who no longer feared him, and this time, there was no crowd cheering, just silence. Theric sat in silence outside the healer's tent. His arms were wrapped, his chest tight with pain. But it wasn't the bruises that burned, it was humiliation. Twice now the human had beaten him. Twice the woman he once controlled had stood beside that human, not him. The warriors who survived the night sat around him, quiet and tense. No one dared speak first. The outpost had seen everything. His fall, his shame, her choice. They didn't laugh, but worse, they pitied him. "I want him gone," Theric growled finally, voice like boiling oil. A younger warrior leaned forward. "You mean killed?" Theric looked at him, eyes dark. "No, worse." He stood slowly, wincing. "We ruin him." In the shadows of the old canyons, Theric's allies began to gather. Not just soldiers, but merchants, traders, and informants who owed him favors. "We'll poison his water, burn his supplies, send false messages to off-world patrols." "He'll be seen as a threat," one said. "They'll remove him." Theric nodded. "And when she's left alone, she'll remember who protected her before." Some looked unsure, but no one disagreed. Not yet. Meanwhile, Cade and Vela lived quietly on the edge of the outpost. Their tent was small but clean, the fire always burning, the weapons always sharp. Cade didn't speak of Theric anymore. Vela didn't speak of her past. They built something new, word by word, meal by meal, silence by silence. One morning, Cade woke to find their water barrels had been cut open, everything spilled into the sand. He said nothing, just fixed them. The next day, his tools were stolen. Then his name was removed from the outpost registry, like he didn't exist. Vela watched him quietly, worry growing in her eyes. "They're coming in pieces," she said. "Yes," Cade answered. "Cowards don't walk through the front. But this is not just about hurting you," she said. "They want to break us both." That night she left a note for Cade and walked toward the inner circle of the outpost. She went to the old council chamber where elders and warriors met in secret. When she stepped inside, voices fell silent. She stood tall, unafraid. "Theric is poisoning the outpost," she said. "With hate, with lies." An old alien elder looked at her with cloudy eyes. "You made your choice," he said. "Now live with it." Vela stepped closer. "I did choose, but my choice does not mean exile. I chose peace and he chose war." One warrior stood. "You dishonored a bond." She stared at him coldly. "A bond made through violence is not sacred." The room split. Some nodded in quiet agreement, others turned away. The old elder sighed. "Then bring proof." Vela left without another word, her steps fast and heart burning. Back at their tent, Cade was repairing a broken heat unit. When he saw her return, she told him everything, the council, the doubt, the need for evidence. Cade didn't argue, didn't question her bravery. Instead, he nodded, stood, and said, "Then let's give them the truth." For the next 2 days, Cade and Vela watched the paths of Theric's men. They saw them slip into water wells, plant devices, bribe local traders. They didn't fight. They recorded, they noted, they followed him. The third night, they caught one of Theric's allies near their supply tent. He was pouring black powder into their food containers. Cade grabbed him by the back of the neck, dragged him to the fire. "Tell the truth," Cade growled. or you won't leave here walking." The man cried, begged, and confessed. Tharek's orders, the poison, the sabotage. Vela brought the recording to the council. The next morning, the evidence was displayed in front of the entire outpost. Screens lit up, voices echoed, and gasps filled the air. The council met again. This time, in full view of the people, Tharek has broken the outpost laws, one elder declared. He used lies and cowardice to bring war to peace. A trial was set, and the crowd gathered in the arena once used for blood. Now, it was truth that would be fought. Tharek stood in the center, unarmed but proud. Vela stood across from him, not with weapons but with words. "You lost me long before the fight," she said, voice clear. "You lost me when you raised your hand not in battle but in cruelty." Tharek roared back, "You were mine." "No," she said calmly. "I was never yours, I was surviving you." The crowd was still, the council unmoved. Finally, the ruling was given. Tharek is stripped of title, of weapon, of clan. He may stay in the outpost, but only— As one watched, not respected, Cade turned away, ready to leave. But Tharek's voice stopped him. "This isn't over," he spat. Cade looked back, his eyes cold. "It is for her," he said, "and that's enough for me." As the crowd dispersed, Cade and Vela walked home under the pale stars, hand in hand, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced more than blades. They had survived betrayal, lies, and the slow poison of hate. And together they had won again, without ever throwing a punch. The sun rose slow over Karvek Outpost. Red light spilled across the ground like blood already shed. The fight in the council pit was over, the judgment clear. But peace was not coming, not yet. Tharek didn't leave. He stayed like a ghost in the shadows, walking with a limp, wearing no armor, no rank. But his eyes watched everything, especially Cade and Vela, and while he had no sword in hand, whispers followed him like smoke. Cade knew something was building. He sharpened his blades every morning, oiled his gear every night, not out of fear, but readiness. He had lived long enough to know when peace was only a mask before war. Vela had grown stronger too. She walked freely through the outpost now, her head high, her gaze sharp. Some greeted her with respect, others turned away, but no one dared stop her anymore. One night, as the winds blew hard across the tents, Cade spotted a flicker near the edge of their camp, a shadow too fast, too close. He stepped out, blade drawn, but found nothing, just footprints leading back into the dunes. When he returned to the tent, Vela was already awake, sitting upright with her short knife. "They're watching," she said simply. "I know," he replied. "They're waiting for something." And they were right. In a hidden part of the canyon, Tharek met with 6 warriors, not from the outpost but from the old blood clans. They were mercenaries now, paid in secrets and hatred. He showed them a sketch of the tent, paths, guard patrols, weak points. "Strike fast," Tharek hissed. "Kill the human taker." One of the mercs laughed. "What if she resists?" "Then remind her what she forgot." Tharek growled. That night, as the moons rose, the attack came. 6 masked fighters crept through the dunes like wolves. They moved in silence, blades drawn, eyes glowing with cold focus. But Cade and Vela were not sleeping. They had moved their bedrolls to the rocks behind the tent. Booby traps lined the path, tripwires and flares hidden beneath loose stones. The first attacker triggered a flash bomb, blinding light cutting through the dark. Screams followed. Then steel on steel, Cade burst from behind a boulder, slamming. One fighter to the ground, another lunged at him, but Vela cut him down with a clean stroke to the neck. They moved like shadows, fast, precise, fearless. Blood hit the sand, dark and steaming. But it wasn't theirs. The mercs were strong but unprepared for unity. They thought they would find fear. Instead, they found a warrior couple who had chosen each other in fire and pain. 2 went down in seconds, another fled into the rocks. The last three regrouped, but it was too late. Cade charged through them like a storm. Blade spinning, eyes calm, Vela followed, her movements quiet and deadly. She didn't fight like Theric, wild and brutal. She fought like someone with purpose. One attacker fell, then another. The last one dropped his weapon and begged. Cade lowered his blade. "Go back," he said. "Tell Theric we're not hiding." The man ran into the night, his breath ragged, his pride shattered. By sunrise, the sand around their tent was soaked in red. The crowd gathered, staring in shock. Some whispered curses, others looked with awe. The council was called again, but Cade didn't wait for them. He walked straight to the middle of the outpost, dragging one of the bodies behind him. He dropped it on the stone floor, then turned to the watching crowd. "No more hiding," he said. "No more backdoor attacks. If someone wants me gone, come face me like a warrior." The council elders appeared, cloaked and silent. They looked down at the bodies, then at Theric, who stood nearby, watching from behind a food stall. One elder stepped forward. "We warned you," he said to Theric. Theric only sneered. "I didn't send them." "No," the elder replied. "But they came from your name." A new law was declared that day. Any who attack without honor, without trial, without voice, will be exiled. Theric said nothing, but the rage in his eyes said everything. He wasn't done. Not yet. But the people were starting to turn. Not because they loved Cade, but because he had done what Theric never did, stood with truth and without fear. That night Cade cleaned his sword and sat beside the fire. Vela handed him food, then sat close, leaning on his shoulder. He didn't speak, but his arm went around her gently. She whispered, "Do you think he'll stop now?" Cade looked into the flames. "No," he said, "but next time he won't use shadows." She nodded, eyes firm. "Then we won't either." And as the stars shimmered above them, the human and the alien woman knew. Blood had been spilled, but what truly mattered had been defended. Not just life, but choice, respect, and the fire of two souls standing as one. The sand around Cade's tent had been cleaned. The blood was gone, but the memory remained in every grain. For days, the outpost was quiet. No one dared look too long at the human and the warrior woman. And yet, whispers filled every corner. Whispers of strength, of shame, and of choice. Cade worked as usual, repairing old heat units and water pipes for nearby traders. He didn't ask for payment, but they paid anyway. Some with supplies, others. With silence, Vela walked freely now, not as a rebel, but as something stronger. She was no longer Theric's wife. She was simply Vela, and that was enough. But deep in the chambers of the Stone Council, the old clans gathered, tension filled, the room like smoke. Theric's supporters sat on one side, grim and silent. The neutral elders sat in the middle, and a few bold voices sat on the other side. Those who had begun to support Cade, an elder with dark blue skin and a broken horn, stood. "This cannot." "Go on," he said. "Our people are divided, our laws unclear." Another nodded. "We must decide. Do we accept this union between human and warrior or cast them out?" Theric was there, standing at the edge, arms folded. His face was tired, but the hatred in his eyes burned hotter than ever. "They broke the order," he said coldly. "She betrayed her mate. He destroyed our traditions." "But what if those traditions were already broken?" came a soft voice from behind. The room turned and Vela stepped in, walking with calm strength. She wore her clan markings on her arm, but she no longer bowed to the rules they had written for her. "I was given to you like property," she said to Theric, "and you broke me long before he arrived." Theric laughed bitterly. "Now you play the victim?" "No," she replied, eyes locked with his. "Now I speak the truth." Cade entered behind her, silent but present. He didn't speak unless needed, and yet his presence alone made many in the chamber uncomfortable, not because he was a threat, but because he had exposed what they had ignored for too long. The elders argued, their voices rising. Some said tradition must not be changed. Others pointed to the mercenaries, the poison, the sabotage, acts all traced back to Theric's name. Honor cannot come from a man who hides in shadows, one elder said sharply. Finally, the High Elder, the oldest among them with silver, eyes and 6 rings on each horn, raised her hand. Enough, she said. We will let the clan speak. And so it was decided. A vote not just from the council but from the clans themselves. Each representative would cast a stone, light for change, dark for tradition, and in the end, the stones would decide what kind of people they wanted to be. The gathering was called in the old arena, the same place where blood was spilled, now used to shape the future. The crowd filled every stone seat, from warriors to healers, young and old. Cade and Vela stood at the center, facing the council. One by one, the clan leaders approached the bowl at the center. They held a stone in their hand, light or dark. They dropped them in silence. No speeches, no shouting, just the sound of stone on stone and the wind above whispering through the sky. Theric stood off to the side, his arms crossed, trying not to show emotion, but his jaw clenched harder with each step. He had once ruled these people by strength. Now, his fate was being decided by simple stones. When the last vote was cast, the High Elder stepped forward. She poured the stones onto the flat altar, 52 light, 37 dark. Gasps filled the arena. The clans have spoken, she said, voice echoing. The union shall not be judged. The tradition must evolve, and the human shall remain. Theric took a step forward, his voice shaking with rage. This is weakness, he shouted. You let outsiders rewrite our blood. The High Elder turned to him, calm and firm. No, she said. We let our people choose who they wish to become. Cade stepped forward, his voice steady. I didn't come here to change anyone, he said. I came because she was worth fighting for. The arena fell quiet. Even those who had voted against him felt something shift. Not fear, not anger, but understanding. Vela took Cade's hand, her grip strong. She looked at the crowd and said, Let this be the last time a woman is chained by silence. The cheers didn't come all at once, but slowly, hands raised, heads nodded, and in that moment change began. Not in fire, but in choice. That night the outpost felt different. Not safer, not louder, just freer. Cade and Vela sat on a hill, outside the tents looking at the stars. You think they'll accept us now? She asked. Some will, he answered. Some never will. But we're still here, she said with a quiet smile. And we're not going anywhere, he replied. Their hands met, fingers locked. And for the first time in a long time, Vela didn't feel like she was standing against the world. She felt like she was standing in it, with someone who would never ask her to bow. The days after the vote passed slowly, not in fear, not in chaos, but in calm. For the first time since Cade arrived at Karvek Outpost, no one stared at him with hatred. Children walked past him without hiding behind their mothers. Vendors sold him food without whispered insults. The outpost hadn't fully accepted him, but it no longer rejected him. Vela felt the shift too. She could walk alone and be seen, not as Theric's former wife, not as a traitor, but as herself. Some still avoided her, but others greeted her with quiet nods, small smiles. The silence had changed. It was no longer heavy with judgment. It was the silence of people learning to unlearn. Cade and Vela moved their tent farther into the canyon cliffs, closer to the old ruins where no one bothered them. There they built something new, a space carved from rock and effort, not chains and shame. They had no titles, no rank, no badges of honor, just 2 hands, 2 blades, and each other. One evening, Vela cooked roots over a fire, the scent mixing with the smoke. Cade sat beside her, polishing a piece of scrap into something useful. She looked over and asked, Do you miss Earth? Cade thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, he said. I never had anyone waiting for me there. She smiled gently. Now you do here. They didn't need grand words. Their bond was in every shared silence, every soft glance, every scar they didn't hide. At night, they lay close, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And when she reached for his hand in the dark, he held it without hesitation. She had once slept beside a man who made her feel like a tool. Now she lay beside someone who made her feel whole. Tharek, after his fall, was rarely seen. He no longer held influence, no longer led fighters. Some said he left the outpost entirely. Others claimed he wandered the dunes alone. But Cade never asked and Vela never cared. Their future was not shaped by the man she walked away from. It was built with the man she walked toward. One night a small group of travelers arrived at the outpost. Wounded, tired, and lost, Cade offered them shelter near the cliffs, food and clean water. Vela treated their wounds, taught the women how to boil local roots for healing. The travelers didn't know their story, but they saw the way the two stood together, and they understood something strong lived in that canyon. A little alien girl with golden skin clung to Vela's arm as they parted ways. She whispered, "Are you the warrior who chose her own heart?" Vela knelt and smiled. "Yes, and so will you one day." Weeks passed and then moons. The outpost slowly changed, not through law but through example. More women began speaking, more men listened without force. Even the council adapted, allowing mates to part if both agreed. It was not a perfect world, but it was growing. One evening, as a warm wind passed through their stone shelter, Vela lay beside Cade in the dark. She turned to him and said, "Do you remember the night I walked into your tent?" "I remember every moment of that night," he said, voice soft. "I didn't know what I was doing," she whispered, "but I knew I wanted to breathe again." He touched her face gently. "You didn't lie in my bed as a broken woman. You came as someone who had already started healing." She leaned close, forehead resting on his. "I chose you that night," she said. "Not because you won, but because you didn't try to claim me." "And I'll never try," Cade replied. "You're not mine, Vela. You're with me." They stayed like that for a while. No titles, no promises forced by old laws, just warmth, breath, and belonging. And as the stars glittered through the cracks in the cave ceiling, Vela whispered, "I don't want a crown, or a new name, or a clan. I just want this each night beside you." Cade smiled, kissed her forehead and said, "Then that's all we'll ever need." And so, the human and the alien woman, once bound by battle and broken pasts, found peace, not in victory, but in shared choice. Their bed was no throne, their shelter no palace, but it was theirs, and in that place they began again, not as enemies of tradition, not as rebels, but as something stronger, a bond not forged in fire, but in freedom.